Good afternoon and welcome to Man, a program on St. Joseph Radio coming to you from St. Louis, Missouri, the Rome of the West. I'm Mark Serafino. This is my co-host, Michael Hayworth, and today we have a special guest, Patrick Daub, who's here today. We're dads being dads. And we want to talk a little bit about fatherhood and explore all of the elements of fatherhood from childhood to actually being a father. But before we get started, as we always do, we'd like to start with a prayer, and my good friend Mike is going to lead us.
In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Amen. O blessed Joseph, Father, faithful guardian of my Redeemer, Jesus Christ, protector of thy chaste spouse, the Virgin Mother of God, I choose thee this day to be my special patron and advocate, and I firmly resolve to honor thee all the days of my life. Therefore I humbly beseech thee to receive me as thy client, to instruct me in every doubt, to comfort me in every affliction, to obtain for me and for all the knowledge and love of the heart of Jesus, and finally to defend and to protect me at the hour of my death. Amen.
Amen.
In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost. Amen.
Thank you, Michael. So, Patrick, welcome. Glad to
you.
have you here today. A beautiful summer day here in St. Louis, where the humidity has not yet made its appearance, but
It's coming.
It's creeping. It's
we all
creeping.
know.
Yeah.
If you've been to St. Louis, if you've lived here for any amount of time, enjoy these days. So, Patrick, let's find out a little bit about you, share with the audience, and tell us maybe a little bit about where do you live, are you married, what's your family?
All right. Yeah, excellent. So I do live out here in the St. Louis area. I live in Florissant, Missouri, which is just north of the city, about 20 minutes. I am married. I've been married for something like 17 years. I think our anniversary is coming up on the 5th of July. We have 7 beautiful children, ranging from 16 to 10 months old. So keeping me busy, but it's a lot of fun, extremely rewarding, right? And it's just one of those things that they say, nothing good is free, and everything worth having is worth fighting for. And
Amen.
my kids definitely test that, though, don't they?
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, no, it's a blessing, truly blessed.
Well, you have probably 2.5 weeks between now and July 5th to figure out how many years exactly it is that you're married.
2008, I believe, was when I was married.
Okay,
But, yeah, no,
just saying.
It's funny because I chose the 5th. Well, we chose, right? The 5th is our wedding date, and my big push for it was it's the day after my wife's birthday.
Oh, wow.
She's a 4th of July baby.
All right.
So when we were trying to plan dates, I said, let's pick something easy for me to remember. The years don't matter as much once you get into the big numbers. But so, it's
Do you
good.
get to combine like one present for?
That would be nice. No, so me, it's kind of one of those things, I don't know if you gentlemen have heard about like the love languages, right? Where different people express their love or feel love through different ways. And
Sure.
for me, gift giving is that's my forte.
Is it?
So yeah, it is. So it's expensive because I like to give good gifts.
There you go.
But no, that's how I show, part of the way I show my love. So,
Right.
for anniversary gifts, usually we kind of swap off, where it'll be a gift for the both of us, usually kind of aiming towards one of us or the other.
Right.
So this year I think it's my turn, so I'm getting a gift is what I'm being told. So it's good.
Oh,
It's
nice.
good. Yeah.
That's nice.
Very nice.
It's a good way to mix things up.
Yeah.
And my wife and I will be married 41 years this year.
That's awesome.
And really, that becomes the gift.
Yeah. Yeah.
It really does. It's kind of like, I don't know what I could possibly buy you.
Yeah.
And I don't mean, it's just like we have each other.
Yeah.
Let's do something that we enjoy
Yeah.
for each other. And, before the program, we were talking a little bit about aging. And by no means this is not an announcement. It's not I'm not revealing anything. But you do start to think about how many more years will we have together in the age that you start to get to. So it becomes less about like the celebration in the outward way as much as it starts to become inward, like what a great joy and what a great privilege.
That's a great way to look at it.
And so good for you. And in order to pay for those expensive gifts, you have an occupation. What is it that you do?
Yeah, exactly. I gamble. No. But no, so I am actually an insurance adjuster, a claims adjuster. So I'm the knucklehead who's out there on the roofs inspecting for hail damage and things like that, and a bunch of other different kind of damages. I was on a roof yesterday that was so old and it was so slippery and it was raining and it was
That had to been terrifying.
Oh, it was, and it was a 1-story, and you think, 1-story, not a steep slope, not bad, but yeah, you start slipping on that roof and you're praying about 10 emergency novenas before you get off of that thing.
And I'm trying to figure out why you're up there. Who is it that's down below saying, it's okay, isn't it? We can keep
Is
it the homeowner or is it the contractor?
The homeowner. The contractor did not get up on that roof. He took a look at it and he's like, thanks for doing that for me. I was like, yeah, you're welcome, bro. You're welcome.
Yeah, that's how did you get into that?
So it's kind of a little bit of a long story, but I'll try to make it as simple as easy as possible. But I had an opportunity in Florida, became dear friends with a gentleman. We lived in Vermont. He was in Vermont. We moved to Florida together, and he started a disaster recovery business where he handles a lot of cities and municipalities in Florida. So I went down there, and I was running basically admin duties and project management duties with him. And once I got out of that, I got into mortgages. And when rates were 2% back in a few years ago, I was working my tail off. And then once they hit 7 or 8, obviously they just said, hey, look, nobody's getting a mortgage right now. We don't need you. So I was let go, and at that moment I had the opportunity to get back into insurance. And I really enjoyed it. And it's really funny, Mike was praying to St. Joseph. We were doing our St. Joseph prayer. And the way that the job came about was we had been praying a 33-day novena to St. Joseph.
Wow.
Leading up to his feast day. And part of it, our prayer is always, pray for the physical, financial, and spiritual health of our family. That's always our intention. And wasn't even thinking about getting into this opportunity or this promotion. Didn't even think I was eligible because I wasn't actually. You had to be at my current position 12 months in order to move up. Well, about a week before his feast day, I'm talking to one of my mentors on the job, and I mentioned, hey, I'm kind of interested in getting into the field. And next thing I know, things are just running. Like it's a train without brakes. It's just moving. And, I just kind of kept sitting there wondering, okay, is this what I want to do? Do I want to get on roofs? Because I don't like heights, gentlemen. Don't like heights at all.
You and me both.
And so we're moving along, and I keep talking to my wife, and I was talking to our priest, Canon Cogashell, and I kind of was just, I'm not sure. And they just said, leave it in St. Joseph's hands. Well, next thing I know, it's the 19th, right, and it's feast day, and I get a phone call, and it's like, hey, you got the job, do you want it? I was like, absolutely. So it was just one of those things where I worked, right, at Labora, and I worked and I prayed, and he gave it to me. And at that point, how do you say no, right? So,
Right.
So yeah, God I put it in his hands, and he took care of it. It was excellent. It was really good. Yeah.
Funny that we're talking about dads being dads, and we're talking about the ultimate father in St. Joseph.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And the role that he plays in our lives that I don't think we often, or at least I'll say, I don't often recognize the importance of the role and the example that he has in our lives. And I try to remind myself every time I go to Mass, every time I'm at church, I spend a few minutes with St. Joseph and just asking him, help me to be the best husband, father, grandfather. Help me to lead a life that's reflective of who he was.
Yeah.
And I may have told this story, but years ago when I was still working, I got a phone call one day from my boss asking me if I would take over a new role. Mm-hmm. But the role was, I was thinking about winding down my career, and this role was going to wind it up on a major way. And I would have to be traveling 3 weeks at least a month, and I was all set to say no.
Yeah.
And I had talked to my wife and said, what do you think of this? And I knew for sure she was going to say, oh, absolutely no. And she looked at me and said, you mean after 30 years working for the company, they have a problem and you're going to say no? So I was like, wow, okay.
Wow. Yeah. See,
but, I appreciate the input. But then I'm at Mass that Sunday, and I'm reading a prayer to St. Joseph, and he talks about your responsibilities and your duty and work. And it was if at that moment St. Joseph was saying to me, Mark, I'm describing you here. Yeah. And then coupled with what Valerie had said, I literally second the view and went into work on Monday and said, I'll do it.
Yeah.
And God took care of it. St. Joseph was there with me the whole way. Yeah. He's such an influence in our lives.
Yes.
In addition to St. Joseph, do you have a patron saint?
Okay, so I like how you say in addition to St. Joseph, you stole my thunder there, Mark. No,
sorry.
No, I'm teasing. You're good. So, I try to lean on a few of them. Obviously, always different patrons come in at different times, right?
Sure.
When the kids are driving me crazy, you go to St. Dymphna, right? But St. Thomas Aquinas, I just think the brilliance and the simplicity. I know his writings are, obviously the opposite of simple, but at the same time, I love the way that he was intellectually and logically able to reason the existence of God and the importance of faith. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, gentlemen, but I believe there's that quote where Christ says to him in a dream, you have written well of me, Thomas, right? Yeah. And to have something like that, to be that on fire, but also to be able to take the faith where, here we all are, basically, at times, I'm sure, I don't know about you, gentlemen, I find myself a doubting Thomas a little bit, right? Like, hey, God, it'd be really awesome if I could do this or if I could have that. But then it's so wonderful to see these brilliant men be able to support and defend the faith in a way where it's just, you can't argue with it.
Well, their strength is remarkable.
Yeah.
Because it's an intellectual strength, but it's also a physical strength, a spiritual strength.
Yes.
Because people like St. Thomas Aquinas and other greats like he, they're able to, their endurance and strength and perseverance. To your point, for me, sometimes I feel like I'm obviously not one of them, and I'm not sure to be up to the task to even try to get to that point. Yeah. Yet they're there for us.
Yeah.
And we're foolish if we don't make them an instrumental part of our lives and our days.
And it's that great example that they provide that gives us the thought or the understanding that we can do some of these things. I mean, sometimes that walk ahead of somebody doing the things that we know we need to do, we just don't feel like we're able to do.
Right.
Yeah. Being able to have that to lean on and go, okay,
yes,
I can do this.
Yeah.
Yes,
it helps.
That's right.
It really helps.
That's right. And it's very often it's our own brains tell us this is going to be hard. Ergo, maybe I could avoid it. And there are just things in life that, whether you want to avoid them or not, you have to do them. And sometimes when you do that, you realize, for as much time as I spent lamenting and worrying and trying to figure out how I can not do this, if I just put my head down and did it, it took an hour or whatever the amount of time was.
I can't tell you how many times I'm guilty of that.
Daily.
There's so many times that I'm like, I really don't want to do it. It's like getting into the pool. I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. It's cold. It's wet. I don't want to do it. But if I get in, just jump, get it, it's done. It's over.
But it's so silly things. Recently, my wife and I drove out to the East Coast for a family wedding. For days, I do not want to drive. I just don't want to make this drive. We've made the drive 20 or 30 times. So you work yourself up. I work myself up over how this is going to be dreadful. And then you get in the car and you start driving. And part of it is like the memory of it. Like we've done this before.
Sure.
We're driving in a car, we're talking, we're listening to a book on tape, and the next thing you know, you're like, wow, 10 hours have gone by, time to, get a hotel room, we're halfway to where we need to be. Yeah. And then you start to think like, this is nowhere near as bad as I pictured it. Yeah. But why? Why do I do that?
It's always my approach. And every time at the end, I'm like, oh, that wasn't so bad.
That's right. That's right. Absolutely.
But I will say, when you come home, what I find is at the end of a trip, and I think it's because it's been however many days, I'm more exhausted when I get home than when we left to go to a place. So, but having a patron saint to be there with you, and someone that you could model, but also just look to for prayer and anything that can help. It's a vital part of the day.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that you have 7 children.
Yes, sir.
Boys, girls?
Yeah, so I do have boys and girls. So it's the oldest, Patrick. Then the second oldest is Lucy. Then there's Kieran. Then there's Aoife. Then there's Ronan, Declan, and Dymphna. So a little bit, all saint names, and just a little bit of an Irish flavor there.
Oh,
But,
cool.
Yeah.
Nice.
Well, before we talk more about the kids, it's very important for me to tell you something important, listeners, and that is you're listening to St. Joseph Radio, coming to you from St. Louis, Missouri, the Rome of the West, and the program's name is Man to Man. I'm Mark Serafino. This is Michael Hayworth, and our friend and guest, Patrick Daub. So a mix of children, that's wonderful.
Yes, sir.
And the age ranges are kind of, a good mix.
So yeah, we had a little bit of a pattern going. It was boy, girl, and it was every 2 years, right? So 16, 14, 12, 10, 8, and then we had a couple miscarriages, and then our Declan was born, and he just turned 4. He was born on Easter 4 years ago, so that was fun. And then our Dymphna is 10 months old. She's already, she started walking just the other day.
Uh-oh.
So it's been, and she's a clever little beast, but yeah.
And it's very apparent by the names that you chose that you may be Catholic.
Yeah, just possibly,
yeah. They're
either
great
that
names.
or
They're
I'm just rolling a dice. Or,
They're super great.
Yep.
And as a family,
Yes.
obviously a beautiful family, traditions within the family, prayer traditions.
Yeah, so it's funny. You're mentioning patron saints, and it was just I was kind of smiling or chuckling to myself. So in our nightly rosary, obviously, that's the big thing. That's the cornerstone. I grew up. My mom and dad made that a huge part of our lives, and I can remember kneeling on the hardwood floor. We had a makeshift altar over the mantle. We would turn all the lights off, light candles, and then sit, kneel and pray together. And so when we do that, one of the traditions is afterwards we finish everything, and then the kids get to go through and they name their intentions and then their patron saints. And it reached a point where I had to start limiting it because we would go and the oldest, St. Thomas, St. Patrick, and they all named their patron saint, the saint they're named after first, and then they go through, any saint that's important to them. Like my oldest son, for a while there was really thinking about the priesthood. So St. John Vianney was his big one. And he still prays to him, still has a love for him. But I think he also has a little bit of an eye for the girls now. But
And he's saying, St. John, you understand.
Yeah, absolutely. He's like, forgive me, St. John. So that's one of our traditions is that they do their intentions and then they do their patron saints. And at one point, either they would forget or somebody would repeat. So we had to create an iPhone note, right, with all the saints on it.
Okay.
And you check, and I think it's like 30 or 40 saints at this point. So that's, as far as prayer traditions, that's one of our big ones. There's a lot of other traditions that we do that tie into our faith. The way we celebrate Christmas, the way we celebrate Easter and all of these things. So for Easter, our big tradition is we go to the entire Holy Week. Like we start Palm Sunday, and we do all of the Easter Triduum, and we do Tenebrae, and then we'll do Easter Vigil, and then we also do Easter morning because the kids sing. And we were laughing I think a year or two ago, we were kind of breaking down, out of our week, how much did we spend at St. Francis de Sales? I think we came up with like 24 hours or something like that over a week. So it's a lot, but it's funny. Monday morning hits, right? And you're still joyous because it's the Easter season, but we're all just sitting there like, all right, well, what do we do now? I miss that Mass. And it's difficult to do, but man, the rewards are so fantastic.
Well, funny story about the Vigil Mass this year because we sat behind you.
Yeah.
And as we were leaving to drive to Mass, I'd been struggling with a little bit of an allergy. It's still struggling with it. And my wife said to me, do you want to bring a bottle of water for the drive? And I said, no, I'll be good. And as soon as I said that, there was a voice in my back of my head said, you're going to regret that. Yeah. So we're doing the Vigil Mass, we're halfway through the prophecies, and I start to realize I have an unquenchable thirst. And I look up, and one of your younger kids had a bottle of water.
Yep.
And was drinking from the water. And of course, now I'm like in a desert.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's, there's an oasis.
Yeah.
And I had the thought go through my mind, I wonder if I offered her $5 if she would give me the bottle of water.
Absolutely. If it was $1 mark, you would have had it and probably a back rub to go with it. My kids, God love them, they don't understand the value of $1, so you could have offered them it.
But no, it was beautiful to see your family there. And seeing families participate as they do in so many of the liturgical events, it's great for the children to see them. It's great for them to have an awareness of what they are and what they mean, for sure. Certain. Yeah. I don't know that everyone has the endurance to do every day, and that's where a parent has to say, I think this is what's going to work for us.
Right. Yep.
And then not feel obligated to go to all of them. That can be tough.
But one of the things across since we've been in St. Louis is to witness the fathers being there.
Oh yeah.
And witness the fathers, guiding their families and on a path of this is something we should do.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then the family following through. It's really, and it's a thing that impresses me to strive to do the same.
Yes.
So it's not like this one thing. It's like I think all the dads support each other.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh man, we were
Our
blessed.
priests, are excellent examples.
Yes.
So it has always been a really great thing for us here in St. Louis. So I really appreciate that.
That's very true. It's true. And I think, for men listening, one thing to keep in the back of your mind is that that example that we set as the dad and as a husband, it's noticed. And it's noticed in some subtle ways. I know that there have been times in my life where I acquiesced through laziness to my wife.
Oh, yes.
Yep.
Right?
Yes.
Because I'm thinking we probably ought to pray the rosary, but maybe I'm interested in reading this article, and it would make, so I'm almost waiting for her to take the lead.
Yeah, that happens. Mike's laughing. It seems like he's been there a time or two before.
Yeah.
And okay, sure. But there's a balance to that. There's an opposite side to that, is that our families, specifically our children, and the world who witnesses that, needs to see men being the ones who lead. And I don't mean that as in I'm the boss, I lead.
No,
I mean as in...
And think about it. St. Joseph, how much do we hear from him? I mean, he's really quiet.
Yeah.
Right.
But he's powerful.
Yeah.
Yes, he
And
is.
he is doing the things that men should do.
Yes.
In that example alone, it's not about you barking all these words and instructions. It's the leading by doing.
That's right.
Yeah.
There's an old, beautiful movie called The Long Gray Line. It's a story about
that's a
West
good
Point.
one.
If you haven't seen it,
I haven't
you should
seen it.
see
I'll have to check it out now.
And there's they're a Catholic family, and I won't tell the whole story or any part of it, but one scene where the patriarch of the family is walking through the room, and it's kind of like, where are you going? And he says, I'm going upstairs to pray me beads. And it wasn't like we should all pray the rosary or have you pray the rosary. He was just setting the example, and he was going to do what was most important at that time. And it's like, that's even just that little scene as an example. Hey, dads, it's okay to do that.
Yeah.
It's okay, actually, as a dad to say, we've prayed a family rosary, but I think I want to pray another one myself.
Yeah.
We don't let the faith happen to us in that way.
Yeah. Right.
Sometimes we have to happen to the faith.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So, family traditions. You mentioned novenas. Do you do a tradition as a family?
A lot of times, we'll throw in just a brief little 54-day rosary novena there, here and there, sprinkle it in.
Slam one in there.
Yeah, exactly. But, there's a lot of, obviously, the church is just rich with saints, right? So there's a lot of times, we'll do a novena to St. Dymphna. We'll do a novena to, if a kid has a toothache, right? St. Apollonia pops in. So St. Joseph's the big one that we do every year. And then there's just several others that we'll throw in leading up to a feast day. And we're blessed, again, at St. Francis de Sales, the amount of novenas that they put out there, right?
Right.
Where it's just, hey, follow along, keep up. So we'll do that one. And then another big one that we do every year is the St. Andrew Novena.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Christmas,
Right? Yep,
right?
yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's, it's just one of those things. It's just so funny. Like you mentioned acquiescing, right, out of laziness. And it's just funny how you sit down and you're like, man, I could be doing anything else. I'm not trying to say I take my faith flippantly. But
No.
There are just times where you get off of work. You had a long day. Maybe somebody was just rude and nasty, and your brain is it's goop. And you're just like, okay, this is tough. And then you sit down and you do it 10, 15 minutes, if that, later, you're just like, man, what the heck was I complaining about?
Exactly. Right.
And it feels good. There was a day recently we went to church within the past few months, and I just wasn't feeling well. And I remember going, and it wasn't a holy day of obligation. It was just, I think we were just going for, I can't remember exactly which event it was, but it was above and beyond, right? And not saying that we should do the bare minimum, but it was a little bit above and beyond. And I just wasn't feeling well, and frankly, gentlemen, I didn't want to do it, right? And I got to church, and I'm just like...
I'm shocked.
Yeah.
You're the first Catholic in the history of the church. You heard it here first,
There
folks.
you go. But we got there, and I just basically just said, Estovir, right? In the words of St. Jose Maria Escriva, Estovir, be a man. And so I just pushed my way through it. And next thing I know, I'm just sitting there, and I feel calm. I feel peace. And we get out of church, and my wife was talking to me, and she said, I could tell on our way you didn't want to be there. You didn't want to go. And she said, but I really appreciate you setting that example for the kids, that you just you do what you have to, regardless of whether or not you want to. And if you put your heart into it, God will reward you. It may not be today. It may not be right then. It may not even be on this earth, but you will get rewarded. And that's how I try to live my life. It's tough, but I try.
And I think both parents have that moment of, regardless of whether you want to or not, you have to do it.
Yep.
It just manifests itself differently.
Yes.
For moms, I mean, I look at moms, and they're raising children, each child with a need or concern at the moment, and they have to respond.
Yeah.
There's no
And that's one thing I always impresses me, is that my wife says you have to meet them where they are, or when they need you.
Yeah.
And there's times where it's like, it's 11:30 at night. What do you want?
Yes. That was my wife last night.
It's so good to be present. And having moms that recognize that helps me.
Yes.
Well, the responsibility is huge. I mean, if we're really honest,
massive.
As men, I think the burden of those types of responsibilities falls more heavily on women.
Sure.
Ours in the home obviously is outbalanced by them, but our level is outside of the home.
Many times.
And I think that's something we can explore too, is because in your work, it's a different environment. None of us work for the church.
No.
So we're working in the world.
Yes.
And we're working in the world as Catholics, and it's got its challenges for sure.
Yes.
And that's something I would like to explore, and we should explore. But I think before we do that, we should talk about how you became a Catholic. Okay, we're just going to break before we do that, and we're going to do a real quick station ID. This is St. Joseph Radio coming to you from St. Louis, Missouri, the Rome of the West. My name is Mark Serafino, my co-host Mike Hayworth, and our good friend and guest, Patrick Daub. Thanks for listening. I'm not sure, but I think we can move on and start talking more about where we are in this topic.
Okay.
And the topic is...
Dads being dads.
Dads being dads. Thank you.
Well,
Thank you for
they
being
go
here.
hand in hand, right?
No, so we wanted to talk about, so you're Catholic. How'd that happen?
Born into it. Cradle Catholic. So my mom and dad both were Catholic, obviously. My both of them, their family kind of down the line didn't always take their faith as seriously. I think my mom actually, part of her family, they came from Freemasons, and
interesting.
one of my great-grandparents or great-great-grandparents, forgive me, I don't exactly know which one it was, ended up converting and was disowned by his family.
Wow.
And so that was how it started. To be honest, both my parents were great examples of the faith. I'm a little bit of a mama's boy. I love my dad. Hopefully he doesn't get offended by that. But my mom was just, man, she was absolutely a phenomenal woman, just absolutely phenomenal. And she and my dad worked very hard together to make sure that, all of us knew that our faith was the most important thing, right? And I mentioned the rosaries with the family. And I think if you talk to any of my family, and they said, okay, what's the, my mom passed away recently past year on Christmas. Thank you. And one of the things we all talked about, during the grieving process afterwards was just my mom's favorite thing to say was offer it up, sweetheart. And, it's just something so simple. And I don't think kids hear it enough these days, right? Yeah. Where it's just like, okay, I understand. You're bummed or you're disappointed. Offer it up. Just offer it up. And so having both of them kind of live that life, my dad offered up a lot. I mean, I come from a family of 13. So there were times he was working 2 jobs, and just struggling to get by because, having that many kids, it's a lot. But he was always an example of a man who just offered it up, and he made sacrifices, and my mom did the same. So when you see true love here on earth and you see it founded in something as just massive and vital and important as the faith, it's kind of hard to be logical and reasonable and move away from that, right? Like, how do you want to be happy and not chase after the thing that's going to give you the greatest happiness?
True.
Yeah.
That's very true. Wow.
It's a great example for parents with their families. Consistency.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Wow. Yes.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
There was never a doubt, like, maybe they're not really in this.
No. Yeah. No. They were in it. They were in it deep, Mark. They were in debt. They were in it so deep.
Yeah. I mean, because sometimes you hear people say, like, oh, there's a priest in the room. Let's make sure we behave. Yeah. I'm like, wait a minute. We needed the priest?
Yeah.
Right.
And, so... I bless their heart for wanting to have respect for the priest, but we probably shouldn't have to organize our...
Yeah. We don't need split personalities for different occasions.
So in your life growing up, you had life lessons.
Yes.
Lessons that you learned from your father, that you learned from other people in your life, from your mom. What's been the most important of those lessons that you now are trying to...
Trying, thank you.
Well,
trying's the key word.
Are you trying to distill down to your children?
So, there's a lot. I'm not going to try to give a cop out here. I mentioned the offer it up thing. That is something that we're really trying to work with our kids on all the time, right? And just making sure that everything, it kind of can boil down to everything you do it for a purpose. And since you're Catholic, that purpose should always be your faith. And so that's kind of one of the things that we try to do. Another is just always speak. Like, you mentioned the priest being in the room, but try to always speak as though Christ is in the room.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yes.
And, I know your brother hit you, but... you don't need to respond that way. Try to find a different way to respond and try to, understand maybe he's lashing out. Maybe he needs attention. Maybe, you did something to trigger it. So those are a couple of things. And then with both of my parents, the biggest thing is just, unconditional love. It's impossible here on earth, but, you got to try for it, right? You aim for perfection. You fall short. But at least you're that much closer, right? It just ties into all of that. So the love that we had from our parents and the sacrifices that they made, we're trying to do that, and we're hoping that our kids can see that where, hey, Dad's working a little bit extra. He's putting in some overtime hours so that we can get the pool pass or, so that we can have food or whatever it may be. Like the food thing, the kids aren't going to pick up on that because, they're oblivious. It's like, oh, food's on a plate. Where the heck did this come from?
Right.
But as far as just the other little things.
Amazon, they just
Yeah,
deliver it.
exactly. As far as just the other things, I want them to see my wife and I. Like, I don't hide the struggle from them, right? I don't share everything,
No.
But I don't want to hide the struggle from them, because then they're going to reach a point where they're going to be struggling. And if they didn't have an example of somebody who struggled and was, God willing, able to succeed and push through it, they're not necessarily going to be up to the task.
So true.
That's very good, because those are the things. That's the example. Tough times. There's always that moment where you can react poorly, or react properly, and they're going to witness either one.
Yeah,
so
right.
just really know that they are watching you.
Yeah.
And it's that quiet stuff that, can you be resilient in those tough times?
Yeah.
So
Yes.
you're doing an absolutely great job.
No, thanks, Mike.
No, you are.
Mike hasn't met my family, I guess. No, they're all great.
I know your oldest son
Yeah.
pretty
Yes, you
well,
do.
and he's quite a young man.
Thank
and if
you.
he's listening right now, we'll get even later. We'll
Yeah.
house that out later. No, it's one of the great challenges is in raising a family is taking the good and the bad lessons that we grew up with, and trying to dissimulate them, and then impart them on our children.
Yeah.
But what I find interesting is it's not so that you could live the exact same life as me.
No.
And it's not so that I could go back and through you correct the mistakes that
No.
I know my parents
Amen.
made.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Because no one can correct those. And the fact that if my parents made mistakes,
Yeah.
more often than not, they're probably subjective anyway. It's my opinion.
Yeah.
Right?
No, 100%.
So that's not the thing. But our parents teach us things and the experiences we have in life. And it's how do we discern what those are, and then how do we pass those on? It's an important part of parenting, and it doesn't happen. It happens purposefully. It doesn't happen through osmosis.
No.
Right. Yeah. Right.
We have to really be, I hate the word anymore, we have to be present. That's being said a lot. But
Mark's going woke.
I'm sorry. So, in your life,
Yes.
aside from your dad and home, how about other males that may have influenced your life?
Oh, man. So that list is, thanks be to God, a mile long, right? And I know I keep throwing out free promotional, value to St. Francis de Sales, but, I've met just absolutely extraordinary men. The both of you, obviously. I'm going to make your heads a little bit bigger on the program. No, it's been
Wait a
great.
minute. We were talking about mugshots before.
Yeah, that's
Example of what
true.
not to
That's
do.
true. Mike is very familiar with mugshots, and I'll leave it up to the listener's imagination as to why. No. But so I'll start with friends, right? So I have my brothers. Those, I'm not excluding them, right? I was just
Sure.
kind of throwing them in the bucket.
That's part
with
of the
my
family.
dad. Yeah, part of the
Absolutely.
family.
Right.
And brothers-in-law and all that. But there are men that I have, again, thanks be to God, been able to surround myself with at DeSales, right? And again, none of us are perfect. Not everybody gets everything right. I don't look to, different friends and say, hey, kids, be him or be him, but rather, okay, look at how he's handling this situation, right? Mm-hmm. So just a huge network of just very fine men that we have at our church. And then the other thing is priests, right? So St. Francis de Sales, we're blessed to have 3 priests, on like a 2-year rotation usually, unless it's COVID, then it's 5 years. But one of the things growing up, my mom and dad always did is they would have the parish priest over for dinner regularly. Sure. And I remember as a kid just both being in awe of it, like here's this holy man eating dinner with us, but then also it just was so natural, right? And so that's one of the things that, with the help of my wife, we've been able to do for our kids is really reach out to our priest. Hey, come on over for dinner and just sit and be yourself and let my kids see what a good holy man who's also just a normal man at the end of the day can do. And it's funny, we recently had our rector, Canon Cogashell, reached out to me on like a Tuesday, and I think it was 6:40. And he was just like, hey, I'm out and about. I'm out for the night. Can I drop on by? And I was like, yeah, sure, that's fine. And I think he ended up getting there around 7. And my wife and I are talking about it as he's on his way. And she was like, "Oh, who do you think he's visiting out here in Florissant?" And I was like, "I don't know." Well, it turns out he was in Forest Park, so it was like not even anywhere.
Wow.
It's like 20 minutes away. It's like usually when somebody says, "Oh, I'm out and about," it's I'm in your area. But no, he went out of his way. He just wanted to spend time with us, and he was talking to us. And
good for him.
At one point, he said, "I said, okay, well, what brought you out tonight?" And he said, "Honestly, I just needed a little bit of a break." And then he threw some shade, and he said, and I knew if there was anybody who was sitting by their phone waiting for me to text him, it was going to be you. And you and so I laughed. But I love the fact that my kids see that, right? Here's this just, again, amazing priest. We love him. And just him feeling so comfortable to just come over and hang out. And he stayed really late. We had a good time. But just hang out and just be like he was part of the family. So those kind of men, right, being able to learn more about my faith, right, because I'm no theologian, but I have friends who practice or claim or play one on TV. And so being able to hear them and get into those conversations, like, hey, what's working for you? What isn't? And kind of going from there. So, yeah, so I would say the friends that I have at DeSales and the priests that we have there as well.
Awesome. You mentioned earlier the Sister Adorers are coming to St. Louis.
Yes.
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow, yes.
And that led to just a comment about vocations, which leads to the question, how do you help your children discern their vocations?
So that's a tough one, right? And it's tough just because I'm obviously not done, right? And it's just one of those things where I really can't even, I'm barely able, it's like cooking, right? You can taste your cooking as you go along and you can kind of see what you need to add. With kids, it's a little bit different, right? You can't really kind of get that great of a grasp of what they're doing. It's just whatever they want to tell you.
Just when you think you know what they're
doing. Exactly. They go and, come home with a sleeve tattoo. No, I'm kidding. But so for us, one of the things, Mark, is obviously the prayer, right? The rosary.
Right.
There was a priest who gave a sermon a few years ago, and he talked about every Hail Mary being a drop of water. And even over time, a drop of water can penetrate the hardest of stones, right? And so that's one of the things that we try to do is just say, okay, we're just going to pray for them constantly. As far as kind of leading them to their vocation, we just keep an open channel, right? And it's kind of one of those things where, so recently we mentioned my son Patrick, and we had some high hopes that he was going to be a priest. I think he could have made a great one. But there was one night he sat down and he said, "Hey, Dad, can we talk?" And this was, I think, last year. And I said, "Yeah." And he's just like, "Hey, would you be disappointed if I wasn't a priest?" And I just said, "No." I said, "I would be more disappointed if you were a bad priest."
Bingo.
Or, I was like, if you push yourself into something and you're not able to give yourself fully to that vocation, that's where my disappointment comes from.
Oh, yeah.
I said, if you choose to marry, I expect you to be the best husband and father that you can be. You do that, and I would be infinitely more proud of you for that than being a lukewarm or a weak priest. Like, a priest isn't the end-all, be-all. Don't get me wrong. I still want one, so Kieran and Ronan and Declan, if they're listening, can fulfill that promise. Make up for your
Pay
brother.
attention, boys. Follow God's call.
Exactly. And that's the thing that we told them, right? And that's a perfect setup. It's just pray. Right? Always leave your heart open. And at the end of the day, we've talked to so many different priests where they come over and we have dinner and say, okay, what did your mom and dad do? How did you get to be as great as you are? And a lot of them pray. Be open to it. Don't force your kid down a path. Don't make them feel as though they're going to disappoint you one way or the other.
It's a sure way to disaster.
100%. 100%. It's amazing how much influence we can have without saying a word, right? And so that's our big thing, Mark, is just be open to the call, right? Just if you keep your ears open and God's talking to you, which he will, everything's just going to happen naturally, and we're just here to guide you along the way.
That's right. And we're here at St. Joseph Radio in St. Louis, Missouri, the Rome of the West. Mark Serafino and Mike Hayworth. The program is Man to Man, and our special guest, Patrick Daub. Thank you for listening. So, vocations,
Yes.
and then, so Patrick's come to you and said, well, do you mind would you be upset if I wasn't a priest? Either way, as a priest or a layperson, preparing a young man for manhood is a part of a dad's duty.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about how you're going about it.
So it's tough in today's day and age, right? I'm not looking to go down any kind of path here, but being a young man and kind of seeing, you see the social media, and it's tough. It is tough being a young man in today's society, right? Mm-hmm. We're not talking just temptations out there. We're talking even just some of the, the anti-male perspectives that are out there, right? And
toxic masculinity.
Toxic masculinity, right? It's so my boys are aware of that, and then you even you get into some of the more heinous crimes that are being committed against humanity these days, and so one of the things that my wife and I have always really focused on with the boys, especially now, right, is just we have worked our hearts off to protect their innocence, right? You used the word acquiesce earlier, and it's one of my favorite words, and it's one of those things where my wife and I have deemed it fitting for our family that we don't acquiesce any influence that we don't have to. So it's, I'd rather build them up, build that armor, keep that innocence for absolutely as long as we can. And then once we start transitioning, as I am with my son now, with my oldest, into, manhood, what does it mean to be man? How does it mean, how does it work that you take care of a woman, if that's your calling, and so on and so forth. So one of the things that we really do is, again, we mentioned having those influences, surrounding ourselves with good people, Amen. Good men, whether it be friends, family, or priests. I want them to see men from all walks of life who are good, holy, loving and respectful, and adore their wives, because that's absolutely vital to being a man, is a true love of women, right? You're the Blessed Mother, just absolutely one of the most perfect examples, obviously the perfect example. But so that's part of it, is really teaching them that respect and showing them through examples of, okay, here's how you do this. And then the other thing is just really making sure that they understand that without Christ they are nothing, right? And if you can look at your examples of the saints, your Saint Joseph is the obvious, easy one. But then there's so many others, St. Louis, so many other wonderful fatherly saints who are out there who not only did they live a life worthy of canonization, they did it with children, right? And so I want my children, my boys specifically, as we're talking about it, to look at those examples and to try to emulate them, and then to always lean on Christ through prayer. Hey, guide me here, guide me there. What do you want from me? What do you need from me? So I think really examples here on earth, examples of following the examples of saints before them, and then just keeping their minds open, their hearts open to Christ, and listening to where He's trying to push them. That's the way to do it. And then also just living my life the way that I'm supposed to, right? I want my kids to see my love and adoration for their mother. Even in the times, it's difficult, right? Not everybody is perfect. So there are times where things get difficult. Maybe you get a little testy with a comment or a tone isn't great. I don't want them to see me rolling my eyes or being like, oh, hey, whatever, Nicole. Because that's the example I'm setting for them.
Oh, sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. So
it absolutely is. It's telling especially your young sons, because they seem to be the ones who go into the world first.
Yeah.
I know that at a certain point, all that you said, the example and everything is perfect. It's beautiful. And then at a certain point, they get a job.
Yep.
And they go out into the world.
Yep.
And I remember saying to one of my sons, look, you're going to go do this job no matter, what significance it is. pretty much their vocabulary is going to be a lot different than yours.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's going to include a lot of words
Yeah.
that you really haven't heard.
Yeah.
But for them, it's going to be acceptable, and you will actually stand out because you don't speak that vernacular.
Yeah.
And you just have to maintain who you are.
Yeah.
And not be tempted to fall into that, because it's that one little step,
Yep.
and then it's also the morality
Yeah.
that people live in the world. So it's always a question of, like, you're going to see these things. When you see them, talk to me.
Yeah.
Let's have a conversation about it.
Yeah, that's 100%.
Because what it is, because it is. I mean, you work out in the work world,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
right? And you go out and you think to yourself, what world do I live in that this is so common that, like, people think nothing of some of these ridiculous or heinous things that are every day.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's that leads me to authentically living our faith in the workplace. That's maybe the biggest challenge that a man faces. We talked earlier about, moms have a challenge, stay-at-home moms have a challenge with their children in that all of the daily responsibilities fall on their shoulders.
Mm-hmm.
And it's care. It's 24/7 care. And it's intense. For men, walking through the doors into your office, whether we want to really acknowledge it or not, the moment you walk through the door, a tremendous pressure becomes evident on our shoulders, and that is, I want to make sure that as I go through the day, I'm the same Catholic that got out of my car, went through the door, and then when I leave, I don't have to put my Catholic back on.
No.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I could be Catholic all day at my work.
Yeah.
And the interesting part is, you don't have to do a whole lot.
Just tell them you have 7 kids and they already know.
I know.
I mean,
know.
and I'm not trying to be flippant about it. It's
No, I
just
know.
that, a lot of times being more reserved with your thoughts and words,
Yes.
and know that you're being looked at. And I don't even want to put, like, there's just a way of being that people will just go, oh, you're different.
Yeah.
Just because you didn't say exactly what they're saying or do what they're doing. And it's like, it doesn't have to be a real big thing.
No.
Yeah, no.
Be consistent.
We've talked about it.
Yeah.
I know I've said that. I've been in meetings where someone would spout out a litany of profanities and then look at me and say, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to curse in front of you. And I'd be like, I'm not wearing a sign that says don't curse.
Yeah.
But it's actually a compliment.
Yes.
In the sense that they detect something. And of course, if they really knew my soul, they'd be like, I was apologizing for that.
Yeah, right.
But it really says that that's a big challenge that men face. Patrick,
Yes, sir.
this has been a blast. I'm
Thank you.
so glad
I've
you
enjoyed
came.
myself.
So glad you agreed to be here. And Michael, it's always fun to
thank
spend
you.
time
Thank you
together.
both.
You have been listening to Man on St. Joseph Radio, coming to you from St. Louis, Missouri, the Rome of the West. And folks, if you're listening from outside of the St. Louis area and you've never been here to experience Catholicism in this city, please come visit our basilicas. We have 2 of them, and we have some historic and beautiful churches. Thank you for listening. God bless you all.
God bless.